All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the new academic year in the Research Ethics and Policy series. I'm Holly Fernandez-Lynch, and I co-chair this series along with Steve Goffey, who is chair of the Department of Medical Ethics and Health Policy. It's great to see so many of you here today, and welcome also to those of you who are joining us online. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome the Reverend Dr. Alvin Hathaway, who is joining us for his lecture titled The 4 R's Formula for Community Participatory Research. I will say a few more words of introduction in just a second, but as usual, I have a few announcements first. Next month, on October 7th, we will have a lecture on evolving ethical challenges in decentralized clinical trials. That will be delivered by Effie Vienna, who is visiting from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. You see a few other scheduled speakers for the remainder of this calendar year, and you can find other speakers for 2026 on our website. Quick reminder about maybe put out a battery if they're on or off. Okay. A quick reminder about some online resources from our department. We have a series of short research ethics training courses that are available for free continuing education credit, and some of these can also be used to satisfy your research ethics training requirements at Penn and CHOP. Some of these are recently updated, so please check them out. Let other people in your groups and departments know about them. And then also thank you to our usual reps, co-sponsors shown here, all of whom make this series possible. And today we have a special thank you to one more co-sponsor of Dr. Hathaway's lecture, the Penn Neurology Community and Social Action Committee. So thank you for joining us today. And also, as always, a thank you to Lisa Bailey for helping us coordinate the series. So it is now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Hathaway serves as pastor emeritus of Union Baptist Church in Baltimore and as president and CEO of Beloved Community Services Corporation, where he pursues a mission of culturally sensitive and relevant community economic development. He has actively participated in over $4 billion worth of investments in underserved communities across the nation, and his leadership extends to advisory roles on boards such as Urban American, Green Line Ventures, and Harbor Bank. Dr. Hathaway is co-founder and CEO of the African Ancestry Neuroscience Research Initiative, which he'll tell us a lot more about today. This is a collaboration between African American community leaders in Baltimore, the Lieber Institute for Brain Development, and Morgan State University, and it aims to address and rectify longstanding disparities in neuroscience research. Dr. Hathaway wrote a first opinion article in Stat News, and it describes this program and his aims to ensure that the benefits of neuroscience reach more people of color by ensuring that they are both leading research as well as participating in trials. And I also want to flag that today's lecture, in addition to being part of the REPS series, is also the Bronstein Lecture. The Bronstein Lecture was funded more than 20 years ago to establish a program on the Holocaust and the ethics of human subjects research. Given that Nazi experiments and the international response to them are among the foundations of modern research ethics, as is the history of mistreatment of Black Americans in U.S. research, Dr. Hathaway's important work to improve the inclusion of Black Americans in all aspects of neuroscience research was a clear fit for this honor. So with that, I will invite Dr. Hathaway up. As regular REPS attendees know, when the lecture concludes, we will have time for questions, both from those of you in the room and those of you online. Just take it away.
I do thank you. It is an honor, really an esteemed honor to come. I had the opportunity to ride on a brand new Acela train, and that was just an amazing experience. Coming here to Philadelphia brought back memories. I used to love Grover, Washington, and so I would come to hear him play. I remember Daryl Dawkins, who was Chocolate Thunder. So I had to, so I'm a little dated. And I admit that I'm appreciative of that. But I came to Geno's and get me a sub. I mean, I just remember this amazing place, but you've introduced me to a new place now, White Dog Cafe. So I'm learning about your amazing food experience. But I do want to thank Dr. Stephen Jaffe and Professor Holly Fernandez Lynch for the invitation to speak. I also want to thank Ms. Lisa Bailey for arranging and coordinating the details of the visit and the accommodations. They were all outstanding. During my talk, I'll share the context out of which I developed what I call the 4R formula for community participatory research: recognition, respect, relationship, results. Recognition. Every authentic research partnership begins by recognizing the humanity, the experiences, and contributions of the community. In my case, I recognize in my brother's life story a window into the struggles and aspirations of thousands of families like mine, families who were left wondering if science had answers for loved ones who live with neurological or intellectual disabilities. Recognition means moving beyond statistics and data points to see the people behind them. Respect. Recognition without respect becomes tokenism. Respect means valuing the knowledge, traditions, and priorities of community members as much as the methodologies and protocols of the academy. At LIBRA, respect required acknowledging that African-American brain tissue was not only underrepresented in research, but that historical mistrusts in medical systems had deep roots. Without respect, there could be no true collaboration. Relationship. The work of participatory research is not transactional, it is relational. My background in organizing taught me that individual meetings, one person at a time, builds trust that institutions alone cannot command. My relationship with Dr. Weinberg is an example of how unlikely partners, one neuroscientist, the other a pastor, can come together with shared curiosity and moral purpose. Relationship transforms suspicion into partnership, and partnership into progress. Results. Ultimately, recognition, respect, and relationship must lead to results. For the community, results must be measurable improvements in health, equity, and opportunity. For researchers, results must include scientific breakthroughs enriched by the inclusion of diverse populations. The 4 hours work like a cycle. Without results, recognition fades, respect diminishes, and relationships weaken. Results give communities a reason to stay engaged and researchers a reason for keeping communities at the center of their work. The genius of community participatory research is that it's a bridge between lived experience and scientific discovery. For me, that bridge was built in the memory of my brother, Charles, sustained through the fellowships I made with researchers and carried forward by communities who insist that they not be studied from the outside, but included from within. So, how does a retired pastor of the historic Union Baptist Church of Baltimore become involved in neuroscience research? By recognizing that faith, science, and justice intersect in the human brain, and that only when we apply the 4 R's can we truly honor that dignity of every life while advancing discovery for all people. So I ask the question again. How does a retired pastor of the historic Union Baptist Church of Baltimore become involved in the field of neuroscience research? By answering that question, you will discover the raison d'etre for my involvement with the Lieber Institute for Brain Development. I grew up in a family with my father and mother, childhood sweethearts from Edenton, North Carolina. My father attended North Carolina A&T for 2 years before he came to Baltimore, worked for Bethlehem Steel. My mother, who graduated from Shaw University with a bachelor's degree, also came to Baltimore, worked for the post office. My father followed, and they were married. I was born in 1951. My brother, Charles Wallace Hathaway, was born in 1948. We lived in a first floor apartment at 1211 Drill Avenue, a historic block in a historic neighborhood with a historic church literally 4 doors away, Union Baptist Church of Baltimore. My brother was what you would call autistic. He was born with intellectual disabilities that required special care. I was about 3 years old when my parents could no longer care for him at home, and he had to be placed in a state institution for care. I have a picture of him waving to us as we drove away on that fateful day when he left our home for good. To my parents' credit, he was an integral member of our family from then until his death at 60 years old. He would bring him home for periodic visits and periodic for Christmas, where he would have an extended visit and spend Christmas with his family in celebration of that holiday. He would look forward to receiving gifts under the Christmas tree. He remained in state institutions until a time when he was released as an adult into a group home setting. I participated in the decision as an adult for his placement with a group, Progressive Horizons. They were a startup company that developed a caregiving service for adults in group home setting. Charles was their first patient. From his placement, the service grew to multiple sites and a host of employees. Charles worked for Chimes International during the day and would return home in the evenings. As part of his care, we would have team meetings with the individuals who were assigned to treat him. They were formal meetings where each member of his team, from psychologist to social worker to employer to home attendants, would meet to assess his development. Charles would be asked questions. We would ask questions. All these sessions were designed to assess the progress Charles was making as reflected in tasks he could complete. Through that experience, I always wondered, was there some treatment, some protocol, some medicine that would return my brother cured and back home to live with us? My brother passed away in 2008, and I preached his eulogy entitled, "He's Not Heavy, He's My Brother," taken from the song sung by the Hollies with lyrics written by Bobby Scott and Bob Russell. In 2021, I announced my retirement after 17 years from being the senior pastor of Union Baptist Church. Yes, the church of my childhood that was 4 doors away from the first floor apartment we lived. 3 years later, in 2017, I became connected to the Lieber Institute for Brain Development by a friend who wanted me to assist them with community engagement. Prior to my roles in ministry, I've been a professional organizer trained in the Saul Alinsky style of community organizing. I specialize in faith-based community organizing. From that experience, I became involved in community economic development and would go on to specialize in new market tax credit financing. I served on the advisory boards of 3 certified development financial institutions, one of which financed 955 Wolf Street, the building where Lieber is an anchor tenant. So when my friend took me to meet with the director and CEO of Lieber Institute, Dr. Daniel Weinberger, I was most curious for 2 reasons. 1, seeing the results of an investment we made in the project, and 2, learning more of this amazing institution that was studying brain tissue. I've been freshly trained in the art of individual meetings, having conducted more than 5,000 such meetings in my career. When Dr. Weinberg and I met, we hit it off immediately, and we discovered we were kindred spirits. He and I are very close and communicate often. Dr. Weinberger is an expert in the neurological mechanism of genetic risks for development disorders, such as the gene that codes, y'all need to help me with this, catecholaminerase, COMT, the enzyme that breaks down the chemical messenger dopamine. Dr. Weinberger discovered a tiny variation in this gene slightly increases risk for schizophrenia, a discovery which Science magazine ranked as the 2nd most important scientific breakthrough of 2003. I now found a collaborator who would help me unwind my long-term search to discover if there was some treatment, some protocol, some medicine that would return my brother cured and back home to live with us. Dr. Weinberger and Lieber had a problem that was a social justice issue. They had collected more than 4,000 brains, of which about 600 were persons of African descent. The social justice issue was captured by a review in Neuron, where Dr. Weinberger wrote, that individuals of African ancestry must be included in research for brain illnesses. In studies of brain disorder, individuals of African descent make up, on average, less than 5% of research cohorts. You have here, and let me click this. Thus, in 2019, we launched the nation's first African Ancestry Neuroscience Research Initiative, ANRI, based on the 4 formulas for community participatory research. Its goal, to reduce health disparities in brain research in order to ensure that all people have equitable access to new and potentially personalized treatments. In many instances, community participation is a check-the-box type involvement. Maybe we can identify some people who live in the affected community, giving them stipends, gift cards, pizza, chicken wings, as they participate in meetings, training sessions, and evaluation. The community is not involved in the design, nor are they meaningfully involved in the economic dimension of the research study. Why? Because their credentials are not recognized by funders, and their status as participants, in my words, is devalued. To address that misconception, I, as the co-founder of ANRI, led the fundraising to fuel its operation. I participated in assembling scientific advisors. As a result, was written to the budget as a true collaborator and shared stakeholder. Out of these different persons that you raised, Able Foundation, President and I were very close. I raised $275,000 from there. Brown Capital Management, African-American asset management firm, its owner and I were very close. They contributed $1 million. The state of Maryland, at that time, the governor and I was real close. He gave 1.75 million to the effort. And then, of course, Libra Institute kicked in. We raised, and I raised $303 million and some, almost $3.5 million to fund this initial effort. Change the dynamics. Here was a community representative, not only coming there with their community interests and their community credibility, but coming to the table with $3.5 million. You know, I must acknowledge, I brought a unique skill set to the table, a professional trained community organizer, an accomplished fundraiser, a track record in nonprofit management, academic credentials, and an established presence in community, business, political, and philanthropic circles. In that sense, I do realize I was somewhat unique. ANRI seeks to level the playing field based on 4 pillars: community engagement, African ancestry brain science, science communications, and scientific training. What does that mean? 1, develop a robust ecosystem for scientists of color, including new education and training initiatives. 2, engage and promote opportunities for improved scientific communications to educate, inform, and arm the community with information that helps to combat health disparities. 3, increase participation of minorities in research and clinical trials. 4, create the most comprehensive African ancestry brain genomic data set in the world. A major breakthrough in our efforts was securing funding from the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. This allowed us to rapidly scale our efforts. They were somewhat intrigued by this, what we call this 4R formula. It's amazing. We focused our allocations in scientific communication, in scientific training. We brought in Morgan State University and HBCU. We did our work there in brain science. And then a large portion of that funds went for community engagement. This was the results of that work. We had a breakthrough, and it was in the Nature Neuroscience. Amazing piece. I didn't realize how much these journals cost. Yeah, y'all know what I mean. But we did a study. It was the analysis of gene expression in postmortem brains of neurotypical Black Americans reveals contribution of genetic ancestry. It was a major article in that June 2024, 27 volume, or 6 in that Nature Neuroscience Journal. We even designed the cover. Brain Genomics in Black America. Took a city skyline, we took a graphic image. We had a local graphic company actually produce that. We saw that as a breakthrough, that we not only contributed a major article, but we also designed the cover. And then I co-authored with Dr. Kofi Jarazi and Dr. Gwinnell Lee Thomas an article here called Towards Equitable Brain Genomic Research, for us, by us. Of course, all kinds of media insert, and you had it all publicized in papers, and we had been interviewed, conversations about this breakthrough. Well, we did something very special. We wanted to make certain that we targeted and our graphics began to look how we were communicating this idea. So we began to have lectures and conversations, and we developed this graphic, we developed that graphic, we developed all of this so that we communicated in a way that we were reflecting the cultural kind of sensitivity and the cultural branding that we felt was important and significant. This was interesting because I had really developed this early concept around the 4 R's. First, it was the 3 R's. And that was way back when I partnered with University of Maryland School of Social Work. We developed really a workbook on mental health for children in schools. And they asked me to write an article there, and I began to talk about some of the experiences that I had that I thought it was important that we integrate into research. And Dr. Mark Weiss headed that up, and he and I worked together on a major book that we wrote way back in the early 2000s. In it, I wanted to translate this 3 R's that we think about: reading, write, arithmetic, into my organizing experiences. So relationship, respect, recognition. And then as I moved on and developed in my experience, I realized that wasn't, but that's not most important. You have to have results. Relationships have to lead to results. And so that then created this 4 hours of community participatory research. And it's now embedded in the field of research. I've been on many different panels. I have good relationships in the Native American community because I began to share some of that with them and some of their work. And then all of that germinated in a major article that was in Issues in Science and Technology. That was in the fall of 2024. And it was Lessons from Baltimore for Participatory Research. Scientific training, education initiatives. I wanted to make certain that our work lived beyond my time and space. So I had a very good relationship with the president of Morgan State University, Dr. David Wilson. I said to Dr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson, how long would it take you to build a $100 million lab? He said, man, it's going to take me a long time building a $100 million lab. I said, why don't we just take over this one we got right here, which is at Libre. And he had as a goal to develop his institution as an R1 research tier institution. And that's what we did. Dr. Weinberg, because of our relationship, opened up its doors. Morgan State University, because of its need, then created a kind of a venture with Libre, where its professors had credentials at Morgan, and Morgan had relationships there. We began to launch a master's program in neuroscience and move that through the academic accreditation process. And then we embedded Morgan deeply in the work there at Lieber, and we began to have students. One young student, Madeline Young, completed a master's theories, and Esther completed hers. Madeline went on to, she's in a doctoral program at Johns Hopkins. We got that certification, as I mentioned, for our Masters of Applied Neuroscience at Morgan. And then we began with CGI to begin to have this cross-pollination between Morgan and Lieber. And so this vision that we had of how can we create an ecosystem actually came into being. What's next? I think from my lens, particularly in this time when words are being canceled, I was asked the question, what happens after DEI? And I said, interesting thing, I'm glad I come from the field of religion, because coming from the field of religion, I understand that the DEI has a Latin derivative, and it's the single for God. So the question is, what happens after God? And I said that what happens after God is that we must be fair in all of our endeavors. And so I began to wrestle with this change in our culture, this change in our time, as we try to continue to make Henri embedded into the reality of our times. I believe it's important. Medical research is important. Inclusiveness is important. Learning from the experiences of people is important, and we cannot retreat from that, regardless of what might be happening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We can't retreat from creating a more perfect society, of creating the beloved community. So for me, what's next was that I then began to move through different experiences. Men Brain Health, Dr. Robert Turnham, there at Duke University now. An amazing experience that he has. What he does is that he's been working there with concussions. He was a former football player. And we always have a conference in the city of the Super Bowl the week prior. And we look and we bring all kinds of persons there, and we do a lot of work in the area of brain health. I said to him, I said, we can't operate in a silo anymore. I then interacted with a young mentor of mine, Reverend Dr. King with Engage Heart. Engage Heart there with the Global Coalition of Aging was beginning to focus on Novartis and Novartis' funding. And they were beginning to do some things that I had shared with them. Why don't we just take the culture of the church, where the church is known to have food experiences, where you got dinners and you invite people in, and why don't we use that as a way to really bring in healthy eating and healthy training? And we trained in 4 churches. We trained the ministry, culinary ministry, on how to now, instead of using high-fat foods, why don't you use tofu? But use your seasoning so that it tastes good. And there we brought in there, and I used it and evolved into that. And then my third was an amazing thing that was happening out of Yale University. They had the Equitable Breakthrough in Medicine Development. My dear friend, Bishop Dennis Proctor, was bringing in the Amy Zion Church, the CME Church, and United Methodist Church. And they were advocating for their members to participate in clinical trials. And I said, what if we created an amazing, what I call, I got to admit, I come from a Judeo-Christian perspective. And so there is a story there where men come together and they holding up 4 corners of a blanket. And in the middle of the blanket is a person who is ill. And they want to bring that person to the personality of Jesus. And they go to the top of a roof and they lean down and they bring that ill person to the master. And I said, that's an idea, four corners. That's a way when we can all work together to ensure that a person that is healed is made whole. But then I wanted to do something very unique. I said, wait, we know if we really want to scale this thing up, what if we got the NBA involved? What if we got the National Basketball Association involved in this? And I had a good friend that's the chairman of the National Basketball Retirees Association. And so now, and you're going to get this is hot off the press. We're going to create, because if you know anything about basketball, Dean Smith used to have this four corners defense where he dribbled the ball around and wait and run the timeout. So let's take this ideas and let's create what we're going to call the four corners for community health. And if God continues with us, we will launch that All-Star Weekend, February 12th through the 15th, there in Los Angeles. Our goal is to bring all four corners, Henri, membrane health, engage with the heart, equitable breakthrough in medicine development, bring all four of those together, and then empower these amazing legacy of legends that were retired basketball players that have gravitas in their respective cities where they worked, and launch them as our ambassadors to begin to tell the story of what it means to have a healthy community. You are the first that I publicly shared that vision glorious. And I would ask that you in your prayers have us become successful, because there is no bigger brand in the world than what these amazing colleagues are able to do, dribbling the ball up and down the court, what they mean in their local communities. Because can you imagine, talk about Philadelphia. Can you imagine if you now have Julius Erving start talking about health equity and healthcare in Philadelphia? What impact would that have? I go into Chicago and you got Dave Bain talking about health equity and healthcare. If I go into Sacramento, California, and you got Kevin Johnson talking about healthcare and inclusion and involvement. And even in my own city of Baltimore, now the newly inducted into the Hall of Fame, Carmelo Anthony, have him talking about healthcare and inclusion. Can you imagine what that will mean to each of you in terms of community participation? And so I believe that we can utilize this 4 hours of community participatory research, and it could become very palatable to different communities and cultures such that we have full involvement of people throughout America, ensuring that we have a healthy America and that we have an inclusive, healthy America. That is the goal that Henri started many years ago, that was embedded in my spirit as a way of trying to answer a question. Is there some treatment, some protocol, some medicine that could have returned my brother home to play with me as a child? I thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now have plenty of time for questions. We can start here in the room. No, just go right ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Teresa Berger. I'm in the Orphan Disease Center. And I do thank you for this talk. This was excellent. I will say, pardon the pun, you're preaching to the choir. The people that come to these events are often people who are already engaged and making a difference in the community. What challenges are you facing now, given the fact that DEI is, the buzzword of the day? What challenges are you facing now in terms of having your program move forward?
Yeah, I think the first challenge is that that immediately, as we talked about African ancestry neuroscience research, we had gotten the first phase of funding from the CZI, from the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, and there was a resistance as we started to go through the second phase of financing. The second phase when we were looking to scale up. And so there is so I immediately pivoted. And I pivoted and said, well, if we're not going to scale it up through a reluctance of mainstream philanthropy, I then pivoted to a strategy that has very credible stakeholders as advocates. So that's my pivot with the NBA retired league, with them at becoming now the advocates of it and becoming the ones that would and I had to make it bigger. Where I once was just thinking of Henri, I then had to expand it to these others so that we've got to have persons that are advocating for increased participation in clinical trials. We got to have advocates that are working with people around healthy eating. We got to deal with the issues of brain health. And then we also have to deal with the issues of brain research. So those 4 areas, I believe, had to come together. So that was my pivot, was to pivot to bring those 4 areas together and then to use all of the capacity I could muster to see if we could get the NBA veterans, retirees to become the advocates for this. And we're very close to that happening.
Good afternoon. So as a former faculty fellow of the Center for Public Health, and currently the president of the National Medical Association, and also the founder of the National Faith-Based Training Institution, I'm committed to helping you.
Bless you.
I'm committed to working with the National Medical Association, the NAACP, and also the Black Greeks fraternities and sororities.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's how we counteract this trend. The pendulum is swinging, but it's going to swing back. I think when it swings back, we got to be prepared with a new vision around how we collectively work together to ensure that it never swings this way again. So I thank you for that.
I'm curious about with your 4 R's and thinking about results. I imagine, as I understand it, that's both having results that continue into the future. Is there also some way that you want to try to show the results to the communities you've worked with? And do you have sort of pathways? How are you sort of showing or feeding back the results? And, you know, obviously science and nature and things, these are big magazines, but sort of to the communities you're working with, how are you showing results and having that feedback go both ways?
Yeah, that's a good question. And let me explain it to you this way, because it was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. The term community is so amorphous. What is it? And so for me, because I do come out of the faith community, I look at the faith community as that organizing entity that brings community together. Now, keep in mind now, I'm an ecumenist. So I don't see faith out of a narrow doctrinal perspective. I see it as the universal reality of people who acknowledge that there is something greater than themselves. So I see it that way. So for me, I said, if I'm going to have a process by which I include persons of African descent, I have to make certain that I penetrate those institutions that were birthed out of the community. And one of the institutions that you know that was birthed out of the community was the historic Black colleges and universities. Union Baptist Church, of which I served, birthed in 1865, Bowie State University. Sharp Street United Methodist Church was just a block away, birthed the Biblical Centennial Institute that became Morgan State University. So for me, the organizing entity for community was the historic Black colleges and universities. Reached down into Morehouse, I reached into Meharry, so I used that to be my definition of the envelope around how community is defined. Now, some might critique that, but I did that because the people that come through as students come out of these communities that I want to serve. Those persons that those institutions are located in communities that want to serve. They have relationships and networks and organizations that are so a part of the community that you can't replicate that. So for me, how do I communicate to the community? I translate this scientific knowledge. I wrestle with this term here. I don't know these words, and I don't know y'all language is like Greek and like Latin. You know, I mean, it's tough. And so we don't really understand that language. But when I filter it through the social media, and I had Blacks in Neuroscience, and I filtered through these persons, they then communicated in language that becomes understandable to communities. So for me, how do I engage the community? I engage the community by those institutions that are most close to the community, that those institutions that the community respect. So for me, it is faith-based organizations and historic Black colleges and universities are the lever that allows me to have communication back and forth between the community.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you for a great talk and insight. One of the things that often comes up when we talk about community-based research or community career research is the disconnect between the speed of funded science and the speed of building relationships and connections. And it takes a long time to do that, and it takes resources to do that. So I don't know if you have any examples of how this kind of engagement actually facilitates research that might be helpful for folks to learn from.
Using Morgan as another example. Here you have an amazing institution. It's building out its campus. It's on a rapid building campaign. And the question was, where's your flag in the community? And so because I got this development hat on too, I'm also investing in communities and making improvements. So we invested in an old former map making plant, dilapidated building on Preston Street, at least 3 miles away from Morgan's campus. And we said to Morgan, what's going to be your sphere of influence? And we were able to attract them out of a process that they call Morgan Cares, to locate in that building 3 miles away from their campus, but in a community that needed to be served. And that process, we began to have the community realize that they could come there and interact with Morgan students, Morgan professors, that they were respected, that they were recognized, and that together we can then outline areas where we could address. Case in point. One of the big issues in that community was that you had a number of single parent mothers who had, unfortunately, had been in the prison system, had to come out, and now they had to be reunited with their children, but they didn't have housing. And so in the conversation, we developed a proposal that would take a block of houses, renovate those houses, specifically for mothers who were returning citizens and had children in their care. We knew it in terms of social determinants of health. We had to make certain that those houses were environmentally free. No lead, no radon. All of those things that in the environment could make a person sick. And the community was excited because the researchers heard them around a specific group of people that if they did not have advocates, no one would ever pay attention to. So that's how we begin, I think, it's got to be around real need. The communities, and you got to take the time. And that's the tough thing because you're operating on a clock. But that clock, that is, it's an old poem. I only have a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. I will suffer if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. We got to realize that those moments that we spend with people are eternal. And sometimes we don't realize that Miss Jones that we meet with can enrich our lives just because of her shared experiences. How did she make it? How did you do it? How did you do that? And I think many times what we have to do, even in our movement, even in what we, you saw me, I'm sitting in a meeting there, we dealing with, I got one ear plug on a meeting where I got people all around the country and I'm be dealing with investments that we got to make. And I'm listening to you telling me about ethics. Mm-hmm. Now I had to have one ear listen about ethics. I had to have a second ear listen to this meeting. But we got to do that. We got to do that because everything, we cannot deprioritize importance of people. But yet it puts a strain on our time. But I'm telling you, I've learned, and I've been around now a while. I've learned that there is no greater investment in time than in the relationship with another person. That's the most enriching investment that I've ever had in my life. And I've met with a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people, and I talk to you as I'm talking to you. My investment of time with you enriches my journey. And I believe that we've got to always keep that at the center of all that we do, even knowing that we have a press of time. Yes.
First of all, thank you. I'm sure as Bergman, I'm amazed by your work. One of the things that both impresses me and also scares me a little bit, and I want to ask you about it, is how amazingly well suited your skill set is to what you have done. You are a community organizer, a fundraiser, an expert in developing finances. You cultivated all these relationships with all these organizations, right? And as we try to think about, okay, well, how do we generalize? How do we scale the kind of successes you've had to say this community or other communities? Not every community has a Reverend Dr. Hathaway, right? So how do we generalize these in the absence of someone with such a unique skill set?
I wrestle with that too, because I think it's very important that we we think about organizations. You think about succession planning, but I think also in the whole nature of community development and community organizing and community progress, we need to deal and wrestle with succession planning. And so my way of approaching that is by involving myself in those other organizations that I identified and working with a whole broad network of persons so that I could help them see to become more adroit and not stagnated in terms of their experiences. So a Dr. Terrence King, who's testified in Congress about his work around Engaged Heart. He was a bureaucrat. He worked for the Center for CMS. His mother had a church. He served there. He was a bureaucrat and never thought about community involvement and community engagement. I went and talked with him. I said, Dr. King, you are a unique talent. You have something that many people don't have. No one has ever worked at the highest levels of government, but also a pastor. But you need to learn community development, and you need to understand how you raise dollars outside of collecting tithes and offerings. You need to do that. So created with him a CDC showed him how you begin to raise money outside of that, and he's going gangbusters. So much so that Novartis gave him $1 million grant to fund Engage with a Heart. It was so successful in the first year, they came back and gave him another $1 million. That's one. Now I said I gotta broaden it in another way. So I utilize my dear friend Bishop Dennis Proctor, who's a retired bishop in the AME Zion Church, and I said to him, we've got to make certain that we find a way that we can scale inside of the faith community. And because of his presence inside of the religious world, he brought together the bishops from the CME Church and the United Methodist Church and the AME Church. And out of that work that we're doing in Yale, I'm now beginning to broaden that reach in that way as well. With Dr. Turner, who was at George Washington, is now at Duke. I began to talk with him to say, you've got a unique network because you have the NFL retirees. So how do we now begin to get the NFL retirees into this process as well? And so I joined his advisory board to begin to move the process in that way with them. So I do recognize that that was unique, the experiences that I had, but I also recognize that I have a responsibility to begin to pollinate that in others. Hopefully, if things work, what wasn't mentioned, I just renovated the elementary school that was attended by Justice Thurgood Marshall in Baltimore. I raised $15 million to renovate his elementary school. In his elementary school, and I know time is running, but I'll tell you this quickly. I see that as the place where I can really begin to do in-depth training. So what I did there is called the Justice Thurgood Marshall Amenity Center. What I did was I said, let me bring in University of Maryland College Park. I brought them in as a tenant. Let me bring in BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. I brought them in as a tenant. With College Park, I brought in their public health department. I brought in their foremost expert on gun violence, Dr. Joe Richardson. And I said, I need to have a robust academy where people can come in and have access to all of us, access to me, and we begin to train them and teach them and involve them. One of the groups, and I will stop with this, one of the groups was the Monumental City Bar Association. These are the lawyers, Black lawyers, primarily in Baltimore. The Monumental City Bar Association was actually started by Justice Thurgood Marshall. Maryland Public Television has just released a documentary on Justice Thurgood Marshall. In fact, I believe it airs first time nationally today, the 10th. Called Becoming Thurgood. On the 18th, I'm gonna screen that there at the Justice Thurgood Marshall Amenity Center. And I invited in the young lawyers, the Monumental City Bar Association, Hispanic Bar Association, and others to come to that screening. And in that screening, my charge to them is going to be, well, we look at what Justice Thurgood Marshall did during his time and space. Look at where we are in our time and space, and what is it that we must do? So I believe that bringing in these groups and having the opportunity to interact with them, having a facility and a center where you can almost create a syllabus around training is the way that you scale up, and the way that these experiences don't diminish when just the nature of life will cause one to diminish.
I have a question. So you mentioned building up the Thurgood Marshall School in Baltimore, and that's one school. Does the other schools have access? Because like here in Philadelphia, we have areas of good public schools, but not all of the schools are good. Therefore, not all children get the same kind of education. You have to have a lottery system to get in certain schools. But how can we, have you thought about like expanding that and spreading that for like early childhood education?
Yes, I answer that in two ways. One is that that I do serve as the CEO of a Head Start program for the past 20 years. I have 217 children in that program, 3 and 4 years old. Got about 45 employees in that program. But one of the things that I did not mention about what we're doing also at the Thurgood Marshall Amenity Center is that I brought in a group called Career Communications Group. Dr. Tyrone Taborn, probably one of the foremost experts in artificial intelligence. He created a platform on the metaverse called STEM City USA. So what we have to realize now is because of artificial intelligence, because of the metaverse, we have this alternative universe that we can go into. And then out of that universe, we can then program and we can provide resources and information. So STEM City USA is an active program right now, and we're basically are creating STEM City Kansas City, STEM City, and cities throughout the country. STEM City Baltimore is going to be one of the main impetus by which we upload information, but it will allow persons to come. And I believe young people will be attracted to that because of the cultural context of what artificial intelligence, the metaverse is at this time. And so that's the way that we look to scale up and provide access to persons so they don't have to come to a physical space. They can go into the metaverse.
Great. Well, with that, we will thank you for a fabulous lecture.